A few mornings ago, I found myself standing in the grocery store, staring at a jar of strawberry jam. Now that probably sounds like a strange place for an old man to lose himself in thought, but my wife, she loved strawberry jam. Not the fancy kind, just the simple one we'd been buying for years. Every Sunday morning, she'd spread it across a slice of warm toast. Then she'd smile and say, "Walter, you always put too much butter on yours." I'd grin and answer, "That's because butter makes everything better." She'd roll her eyes, and we'd both laugh before breakfast had even begun. Standing there in that grocery aisle, I realized something. It wasn't the jam I missed, it was the conversation. My name is Walter. I'm 101 years old. I spent over 40 years building houses, but the greatest thing I ever helped build was a home with the woman I loved. We were married for 67 wonderful years. Long enough to finish each other's sentences, long enough to know what the other was thinking just by looking across the room. Long enough for ordinary days to become extraordinary memories. People often ask me, "Walter, what do you miss the most?" They expect me to say birthdays, Christmas dinners, family vacations. Those certainly meant a lot. But the truth is, the things I miss most are much smaller, much quieter. The little things. I miss hearing her humming while she watered the flowers. I miss finding one of her books lying open on the kitchen table. I miss the way she'd remind me to take my hat whenever the weather turned cold, even when I insisted I didn't need it. Most of all, I miss having someone who knew every chapter of my life. Someone who remembered stories I'd forgotten. Someone who could look at me across a crowded room and somehow know exactly what I was thinking. When my wife was nearing the end of her life, she squeezed my hand one evening and quietly said, "Walter, promise me something." I asked, "What is it, sweetheart?" She smiled, that same smile I'd fallen in love with all those years before. "Don't spend the rest of your life remembering how I died. Remember how we lived." I've tried my best to keep that promise. Some days I've done better than others, but after all these years, I've learned that grief doesn't only live inside the big memories, it also lives inside the little things. And strangely enough, those little things have become some of my greatest treasures. So today, I'd like to share a few of them with you, because if you've ever loved someone deeply, I have a feeling you'll recognize these little moments too. Pull up a chair, sit with this old carpenter for a few minutes, and let me tell you why the smallest memories have turned out to be the ones my heart holds on to the tightest. The first little thing I miss is hearing her say, "Good morning." Funny, isn't it? After 67 years together, you'd think I'd miss the big things first, the anniversaries, the vacations, the holidays. But no, I missed two simple words. Every morning, before either of us had fully opened our eyes, she'd smile and quietly say, "Morning, Walter." Some mornings she'd already be awake reading her Bible. Other mornings I'd wake first and watch the sunrise creeping through the bedroom curtains until she opened her eyes. It became our little ritual. No matter what kind of day waited for us, we always greeted each other first. The first morning after she was gone, I woke up before sunrise like I always had. For just a moment, everything felt normal. I reached across the bed, expecting to feel her hand. Instead, I felt an empty pillow. That was the moment it truly became real. Not at the funeral, not at the hospital, but right there in the quiet of an ordinary morning. These days, I still wake before the sun. Old habits don't disappear very easily. I make my coffee, open the back door, feed the birds, and sometimes, without even realizing it, I'll quietly say, "Morning, sweetheart." It probably sounds a little silly, talking to someone who isn't sitting across the table anymore, but after loving someone for nearly 7 decades, conversation doesn't simply stop because one chair becomes empty. Love has a way of continuing, just differently. The second little thing I miss is her reminding me about things I insisted I hadn't forgotten. Every single Sunday before church, she'd ask, "Walter, did you remember your hearing aids?" I'd grin and answer, Of course I did. Then she'd point toward the kitchen counter, where they were still sitting exactly where I'd left them. She was usually right. Actually, she was almost always right. I just wasn't wise enough to admit it at the time. Now, whenever I put on my hearing aids, I still hear her voice before I hear anything else. "Walter, you forgot them again." It's funny how love leaves little echoes behind. Sometimes they arrive through a photograph, sometimes through a favourite song, and sometimes through something as ordinary as a pair of hearing aids sitting on a kitchen counter. But the little thing I miss more than almost anything else is something I never truly appreciated until it was gone. Her waiting for me at the end of the day. The little thing I miss more than almost anything else is knowing someone was waiting for me. It didn't matter if I'd been gone for 20 minutes or half the day. When I opened that front door, she always looked up. Sometimes from her favourite chair with a book in her lap, sometimes from the kitchen, wiping her hands on that old blue apron she'd worn for years, and almost every time she'd say, "You're home." Such ordinary words, but after all these years, I've realised those words carried a meaning much bigger than themselves. They meant, "I noticed you were gone. I'm glad you're back. You belong here." Back when I was working construction, I'd come home covered in sawdust. Some days I'd be tired enough to fall asleep in my boots. She'd hand me a cold glass of iced tea before I even asked. Then she'd smile and say, "Long day?" I'd nod. She didn't always need the details. Sometimes she'd simply sit beside me on the porch while we watched the sun disappear behind the trees. No advice, no speeches, just quiet company. Looking back, I think that's one of the greatest gifts two people can give each other, their presence. These days, when I come home from the grocery store or from my morning walk, the house is quiet. I unlock the front door, step inside, and for just the smallest moment, part of me still expects to hear, "You're home." Old habits of the heart take a long time to change. Sometimes they never do. And maybe they're not supposed to. The other day my grandson stopped by to help me fix a loose fence board. As he was leaving, he turned around in the driveway, waved, and shouted, "Love you, Grandpa." Without thinking, I answered, "Drive safely." Then I stood there watching his truck disappear down the road. Suddenly, I smiled, because that's exactly what my wife used to say every single time I left the house. "Drive safely." Even if I was only going to the hardware store 5 minutes away, I'd tease her, "I've been driving longer than you've been telling me to be careful." She'd just smile and reply, "I know." But I still like saying it. Now, every time one of my children or grandchildren leaves my house, I hear myself saying those very same words. Drive safely. I never planned to. They simply became part of me. That's the wonderful thing about loving someone for so many years. Little pieces of them quietly become little pieces of you. I've come to believe that's how love survives. Not only in photographs, or wedding rings, or old letters tucked away in drawers. It survives in the words we keep saying, the habits we keep practicing, the kindness we continue giving away. But there's one final little thing I miss, the smallest one of all, and somehow it's the one that still makes me smile every single day. The final little thing I miss is hearing her say, "Good night." It was never anything fancy, no long speeches, no dramatic moments, just 2 simple words every single night. No matter how busy the day had been, no matter if we'd laughed together or disagreed about something as silly as where I left my boots, we never went to sleep without saying, "Good night." Looking back, I don't think we realized we were creating a tradition. We were simply ending each day the same way we'd begun it, together. There were nights when she'd already be half asleep. I'd quietly climb into bed, trying not to wake her. She'd barely open one eye, reach over and squeeze my hand, then mumble, "Good night, Walter." I used to tease her, "I don't think you're even awake." She'd smile with her eyes still closed and whisper, "I'm awake enough to love you." Oh, how I miss that. The first night after she was gone, I walked through the house turning off the lights, checked the back door, made sure the windows were locked, exactly as I'd done for years. Then I climbed into bed, The room felt so quiet that I could hear the old ceiling fan turning above me. For a long time, I simply stared into the darkness, waiting, almost expecting to hear her gentle voice, but the house stayed silent. That night, before I closed my eyes, I whispered, "Good night, sweetheart." I've done that more nights than I can count since then, not because I believe she can answer me, but because love doesn't always need a reply. Sometimes it simply needs to be spoken. People often ask me, "Walter, does it ever get easier?" I usually think for a moment before I answer. The missing never really goes away. You simply learn to carry it differently. In the beginning, grief feels like a heavy backpack you can barely lift. Over time, it doesn't become lighter. You simply become stronger. And somewhere along the way, the tears begin sharing space with gratitude. Today, when I think about my wife, I don't picture the hospital. I don't picture her final days. I picture strawberry jam on Sunday mornings, her reminding me to wear my hat, the sound of her humming while she folded laundry, the way she'd wait by the window whenever I was late coming home, her quiet, "Drive safely," her gentle, "Good night." Those tiny moments have become the richest memories of my life. If you're blessed enough to still have your husband or your wife, please don't overlook the ordinary things. Say good morning, say good night, hold their hand while watching television, walk together after supper, laugh over burned toast, leave little notes on the kitchen counter. Because one day, you may discover what this old carpenter has learned. The little things were never little. They were the whole story. Before I go, I'd like to ask you something. If someone special came to your mind while listening today, tell me their first name in the comments. Not because they're gone, or even because they're still here. Simply because someone who has filled your life with little moments deserves to have their name spoken with love. I read as many of your comments as I can, and tonight I'll say a quiet prayer for every name I see. Thank you for spending these few minutes with me. Take good care of the people you love. Don't wait for birthdays, don't wait for anniversaries, and please, don't wait for tomorrow to say, "I love you." Because after 101 years, I've learned that life isn't remembered by the big occasions. It's remembered by thousands of little moments shared with the people who made a house feel like home. Until next time, God bless you, and never underestimate the extraordinary power of ordinary love.